Okay, everyone. So we are going to be looking at consumption of different resources and how those resources are managed, as well as looking at a concept known as carbon footprint. So just so you're aware of, we're going to go through the beginning part here. One of the main resources that actually is quite known around the world, in Canada at least, that we are able to export is lumber. We have such a wide area of land, right? Our boreal forest that has lots of trees that make great lumber that of course is used for many different things, from buildings to paper to household products, etc. So we're going to look, there's three main types of deforestation techniques. They each have their own advantages and disadvantages. So we're going to look at each one here. So we have the clear cutting method, we have shelterwood cutting method, and we have selective cutting method. So clear cutting is exactly what it sounds like. So you essentially take a section of the forest or wherever you're trying to remove the trees, and you literally just cut everything down. So you literally clear the land by cutting everything down. So clear cutting is the removal of all or most of the trees in a given area. So, of course, the advantage of this is you get a ton of lumber in a very short amount of time, okay? However, in terms of if I was, environmentalist, there's many different disadvantages. So not only are you removing the entire habitat for many different animals, but what's happening is you're also going to cause soil erosion, which we looked at earlier in this unit. So this is where if there is no producers or there's no protective trees in that area, when there is rain and when there is wind, it can essentially wash away the nutrients in the soil. So what can happen after clear cutting, after of course all of the trees are gone and the habitats have been destroyed, the soil over time becomes a poorer quality than it was before. So there's not as many nutrients being returned to the soil, and you have soil erosion happening as well. So the second technique is shelterwood cutting. So shelterwood cutting is essentially where you are you're only cutting down mature trees. So meaning trees that are older or they've essentially fully grown. So what does this mean? So you're kind of picking and choosing which trees you're cutting down based on the age of the tree. So this is the advantage of this, of course, is you're still leaving the trees behind that are able to keep the habitats going for that particular forest community. So when you're doing this, it's great for the environment because you're still allowing for the habitats to be maintained, and you're still allowing the younger trees time to grow. So the disadvantage of this is sometimes what happens is because the larger trees are gone, the smaller trees can sometimes not have the smaller trees won't have as much protection. So protection against, let's say, a windstorm or if there's a really bad rainstorm, right? So they may get damaged. The other downside to this is that it takes a really long time to do this process. So you have to imagine people have to go out into the forest and essentially pick and choose which trees they're doing. So it's a much longer process than just cutting everything down. Also, the time it will take to get more lumber from this area is longer because you have to wait for the younger trees to actually mature. So, trees don't grow super quickly. This could be anywhere from 5 to 25 years in between. So, of course, from an environmental point of view, this is a much better choice. But it depends on if you are looking at it from an environmental point of view or if you are, the owner of a lumber company, economically. Okay, so then we have the last choice here that we have is selective cutting. So this is very similar to shelterwood cutting. Okay, the difference here is that shelterwood cutting only cuts down mature trees, Selective cutting really means that you're just picking and choosing which trees you'd like to cut down. So this might be a specific species of tree, like maybe we want to cut down 20 oak trees, or we want to cut down 15 pine trees. So selective cutting just means that you're selecting certain trees to get cut down, not necessarily the mature trees only. Okay, so this is an expensive process, very similar to shelterwood cutting. It's going to take a long time as well. You have to have somebody go out into the tree and mark off which trees are actually going to be selected to cut down. However, same advantage as before, you do have the environmental, from an environmental standpoint, it's still being maintained because you still have trees that are able to be part of the ecosystem. Okay, so that's deforestation. So now in terms of, sorry about that. Okay, so in terms of stewardship, so my hope for everybody in this class is that we are all ecological stewards of the earth. So what does that mean? That means I'm hoping that not only from our class, but from all of your points of view in life and education, that you should be taking responsibility for not only your actions, but try to bring forth responsibility for everyone's actions there in your life, or that you can help to be a good example for. So what does that mean? So we want to try and maintain and protect our environment, right? So obviously, I don't expect, you're not the owner of a lumber company and you can't make the decision of, maybe you are, but you can't make the decision on how you're going to cut down trees. But small things like recycling, trying to use a smaller amount of paper products, making sure that you carpool or that you take the public transport or you walk or ride your bike wherever you can. Turning off lights when you're in a room, when you're not in a room, I should say, and you're not using energy. Try not to use energy when you don't need to. Turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth. Small things that you're able to do that help to protect and maintain our environment, right? So how can we measure how well we're doing? So there's a term or a concept known as an ecological footprint. So what this is talking about here is it kind of takes into consideration all the choices that you make in your life. So from everything from how much electricity you use, how much water is used, where do you buy your food? Is it locally produced foods, or is it, from shipped in from many different areas? Where do your mom and dad work? Where you'll work in the future? So everything that you do in your life has some sort of impact on the environment. Sometimes it can be a big impact, sometimes it can be a small impact, but an impact nonetheless. So what I'm going to have you do after we go through this lesson actually is we're going to, I'm going to have you calculate your ecological footprint, and it's just going to ask you some questions about what are some things you do in your life, and it will let you know essentially how much of a land area would you need to sustain your life. So the footprint part of this, you can see there, have a footprint here. So the larger your footprint, the worse it is for the environment, right? We want to try and minimize our footprint. We want to minimize the impact we're having on the environment. So most of the, let's pick a different color here. I don't know if that's going to show up properly. Let's do this. Okay, so most of the ecological footprint in terms of how this is calculated is all relative to how much carbon dioxide you are producing. So I'll give you a quick example. So if you're buying, let's say, apples that are at a farmer's market that are grown an hour away from where you live, that's going to have less of a carbon dioxide output than if you were to buy bananas that are from Costa Rica, right, that had to get flown here. So when you're doing this, when you're answering these questions as you go through the calculator, right, that's an example of something that you can change very easily, right? Eating more local products. So you'll notice that it's going to tell you your carbon dioxide output, and that's what it's related to. So essentially how much fossil fuel energy had to go in to accomplishing that task. So just an example here. So, right, a carbon footprint is a measure of the impact of our activities and what they have on the environment, and in particular, climate change. So we're talking about carbon dioxide in the air. So it relates to the amount of greenhouse gases, which is what we just finished saying, and what they would be produced in our day-to-day lives. So the carbon footprint is a measurement of all the greenhouse gases that would be produced, and the units are usually grams or kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. So you'll see this example better when you do your carbon footprint calculator after this lesson. But these are just some examples. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, so here are just some examples and comparisons. So a supermarket plastic bag has a lower carbon footprint than a recycled paper bag. So it's funny because you would think that the recycled paper bag would be less of an imprint, but you have to remember that energy had to go in to first make that paper bag the first time, and then energy went into, I don't know why that happened, and then energy had to go in to recreate it. Like the recycling process also takes up energy, right? One rose has about the same carbon footprint as about 4.5 kilograms of bananas, one single rose. So why does it have such an impact? So roses are actually one of the tougher flowers to grow. They need a lot of different nutrients, and they need the certain conditions to be right. So the amount of time that goes into producing a rose and packaging it and driving it to where it's going to be sold is, quite high when you compare it to the amount of bananas you can get for that same energy output. Okay, 1 kilogram of tomatoes has the same carbon footprint. 1 kilogram of tomatoes has about 50 kilograms of carbon footprint output. Now, this is all dependent on where these things are coming from. So these are kind of just generic facts that I found online. But think about it, right? 1 kilogram of tomatoes from California is going to have a different carbon footprint than 1 kilogram of tomatoes from the Niagara region in Ontario. So just be mindful of that as well. Now, taking an airplane is probably one of the worst things that we can do for the environment. The amount of exhaust that comes out from even one flight is astronomical. Does that mean I don't want you to ever go on an airplane again? Does that mean I'm not going to go on an airplane again? No. But if it's something that you can, if you're taking an airplane to go somewhere that's only a short drive away, maybe if you have the time or you can, that could be a choice that you would make in the future when you're older. But a 747 plane, so these are usually the planes that go across oceans. So usually when they have one flight, the amount of weight that the airplane is, which is very, very heavy, 2.5 times the weight of it itself. So basically more than double the airplane's weight is what the carbon dioxide footprint would be from one flight. So it is quite large. So I'm going to link on D2L, you'll see that there's going to be a link to your carbon footprint calculator, so you can check it out. So these are just FYI facts. I don't expect you to know exact numbers. It's just to give you some information so you can see the comparison between values here. Okay. All right. So we'll wait to the next one.